Hey guys, it's your boy, Politicope 20, back again with another great commentary. There's a lot of, shit going on in American politics. We have sometimes where it's kind of a lull, relatively speaking, and then sometimes where it gets like days like today, where it gets relatively crazy. But I'm not actually going to talk about what happened today with the filibustering of the voting rights thing. I may make a video about that tomorrow. But what I wanted to talk about tonight was just an objection, or my objection mainly, to the very concept of political dialogue, at least in the United States, and at least in the contemporary United States. I feel, and I know that I have at least some viewers who are from other countries, and I think I've discussed this before, and if you're not an American, or I don't know that you have to be an American per se, but if you're not an American, or you don't at least live in America, I just don't think there's anything in other countries that there's no way, if you live in another country, if you're not an American or don't live in America, you have no reference point to understand what politics is like here. I don't think there's ever been anything in history where there's been so much partisan, so much of people's identity is about partisan politics. Let me give you an example. In your country, if you're in Sweden or something, you might vote for the Progress Party or something, but that's it. You vote for it. Here, you don't vote Republican. You are Republican. And the same thing is the reverse with Democrat. And again, I really don't think there's anything like that, at least to the extent it is in the United States anywhere else. Now, it hasn't always historically been like that in the U.S. This polarization has been happening for a while. Some things are just, due to internal factors in the United States, but a lot of it is also just due to the way the U.S. system is set up. The way the system that we have is our system. We have the oldest continuous democracy in the world, and this is not our system. The way it functions today is not the way the founders imagined it. They had no idea when they were making it that it was going to lead. This system is not a system designed for strong political parties. Although in our system, it's weird because we have strong political parties in terms of voter base, the voter base is strong, but the actual parties themselves are weak. Whereas in Europe, or really anywhere else in the world, you have parties that have a lot of control over their members, top-down control over their members. So they can stop Trump types from getting elected, or as their party things. But those parties also don't have as much allegiance from the people. And ironically, it's the United States is actually extremely democratic within the parties. Any undemocratic things in the United States are outside of the parties. So it creates a weird. It's kind of a, what I would call a virtuous cycle. But if you're against it, it's a vicious cycle, where the parties, the parties get polarized, which makes the parties more polarized, which makes people more radical. And as the people get more radical, they make the parties more radical, which, so you get this situation where, when I was born in 1983, and there was huge overlap, then with the political parties. For instance, when I was born, Ronald Reagan was president, and he got legislation done through his entire term. Success. He had a very successful presidency. Now, maybe not in terms of results, but in terms of getting shit passed. And that was all with the Democrat Congress in both houses. And because there was so much overlap in the parties, you could get stuff done with, Democrat and Republican votes. And it's just not possible today, because no Democrat's going to vote for anything with Republicans. And, there's increasingly few Republicans who are willing to vote for Democrat stuff. But anyway, so what I wanted to use as an example is, I've mentioned him before, this guy, Joe Walsh. He was the guy who's saying that white people need to be more uncomfortable or something. And I said in that I wasn't going to make fun of him, and I didn't. I didn't in that video, but this is a different video. So a little bit more of the story about Joe Walsh. We have this thing in America called Never Trump. Again, for you non-Americans, probably haven't heard of it. It's from people who were generally people who are part of the conservative movement, not necessarily high up in the Republican Party, although a lot of them was. For instance, Joe Walsh was a former member of the House, who they are like, they're really big, like, we're conservative, but we're against Trump. So, but you've seen these people over the last, since Trump came on the stage in 2015, so almost 7 years now, they've been around. And the thing is, like, these people, like liberals, people who are just liberal, like can just be liberal, but these people essentially have no reason for living outside of Trump. And if you go and if you read their stuff, all they talk about is Trump all the time. And Trump hasn't been in office for like over a year now. Like, if you think Trump lives rent-free in the heads of the left, and don't get me wrong, Never Trump really is the left, but it's you should see how he is with Never Trumpers. I mean, it's crazy. But anyway, these people have no political relevance. They have zero power and no influence. However, you hear a lot about them because MSNBC loves them and it features them all the time. They have this group called the Lincoln Project, which is this total grift where you have these former Republicans who've got no future in Republican politics. So they make these ads, these very expensive ads that they overcharge for. They make these ads that aren't actually designed to convince anybody anything. They're just designed to rile up, centrist, anti-Bernie left-wingers, like white suburban left-wingers. That's really their whole purpose, is to just rile them up, either to rile them up or to get them to high-five each other. That's it. That's all there's. And like, I don't know if liberals just don't realize it or what. But so they get tons of donations. Like it's some kind of like therapy for liberals to donate to these guys, even though it's been proved that they're just pocketing a lot of this money and using relatively little on the ads, which is fine, man. Because I could see that, like, you get off on, you feel powerless and it makes you feel like you're hitting back. Okay, that I can understand the liberals who are donating. But these guys, and don't get me wrong, I know that they hate Trump. I believe that they hate Trump, but I think what they're doing is so despicable to, like, to rip people off like that. And they've been the worst offenders when it comes to telling them, like, all these Trump voters, with their guns are waiting to literally come and kill you, which is going to happen if the Republicans take back Congress. And, I see it in their threads. And, like, these people on Twitter. I'm talking about, like, the regular people who don't understand that this is just rhetoric, that these guys are lying for donations, and it's causing like a lot of people, because liberals tend to. I'm not saying that every liberal is mentally ill or even close to that, but there's definitely more mental illness on the left. Like, a lot of these people are nuts, and they're very prone to anxiety and panic and stuff. So this kind of talk is, like, very traumatizing to a lot of them. And I think it's to prey on people like that, to prey on psychologically vulnerable people, to make more money and just raise your status, or even, and if it really is just to get back at Trump, even that's despicable. Like, if you were gonna, like, I understand, like, wanting to get at Trump or, like, whoever your political enemies are, but don't do it at, like, the expense of relatively innocent people, who aren't psychologically equipped to handle this. So anyway, one of these Never Trumpers, though, is Joe Walsh. Again, I know I've mentioned him. He's different, though, because he's not part of the Lincoln Project grifters. He voted for Trump and stayed pro-Trump for a while, like after 2016. At some point, he converted. I don't know why. I don't care. But after that, he became increasingly anti-Trump, to the point where, he lost his radio show. Or maybe he already had one, because I don't remember. He started out as a radio show guy back in the day. Then in the 2010 Tea Party wave, he went into Congress as a Tea Partier. So he was part of the right wing of the Republican Party for a while. But he supported Trump in 2016. After 2016, at some point he turned. So when he turned on Trump, he lost, like, all his followers, all his friends, all his family members, stuff like that. And but since he's not at the same level as the Lincoln Project types, the like because he actually was unlike really I think all the other Never Trumpers that I'm aware of. He was pro-Trump at least at one time. So whereas I consider the other ones, who I consider all the Lincoln Project and Jonah Goldberg types, I consider them just to be frauds because they were because to me, if you chose Hillary or Biden over Trump, well, Biden's a different story because he came later. But if you chose Hillary over Trump, or you were saying like Trump is a unique threat to democracy, or saying it means you were never really with us in the first place. That you never really believed that shit in the first place. So those people are just irrelevant frauds. But somebody who supported Trump and then gave up everything to oppose Trump, presumably really believes his stuff. But just Joe Walsh's politics haven't actually changed. That's another interesting thing. He's still pro-life. He's still very against anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism in America is kind of a political thing. It tends to be something that most people don't think about it and don't care about it. I've mentioned this before. I'm Jewish. I've never experienced anti-Semitism. Unless you count online, which I don't because that's not really. But in real and around here, where everybody's German and Polish. So you think if there was anywhere there'd be anti-Semitism, would be here. I've been made fun of for other shit. It's not that. But in American politics is a little different. There's certain tribal identity things you do, and one tribal identity on the far evangelical right is to attack anti-Semitism. I'm not saying it's not genuine. I think it is, but that's one that is very pro-Israel, very against anti-Semitism, and very sensitive to something that's perceived as anti-Semitic. So he's still like that. Joe Walsh is still like that. He's so all the evangelical things you'd look for. Although I think he's Catholic. Pro-Israel and against anti-Semitism. Very pro-life, pro-gun. He's even actually been pro-free speech. Obviously there's a limit to it. There's only so far you can go to it and still be on the left these days. But still that. And really into that typical American right-wing nonsense, like the debt, mud debt, and stuff like that. And so you guys who are from outside of America, are those things that the right wingers in your country spurg about? Do people in your country, do the right wingers in your country spurg about mud debt, or do they spurg about things guns is real, but I know, and pro-life, I know that you guys don't have that in your countries, but mud debt, must spending. Is that do you ever hear do right-wing politicians in non-American countries ever talk about that shit? If you're non-American, let us know in the comments. So anyway, so Joe Walsh then goes and he starts this podcast called White Flag. He's really active on Twitter. He's got a lot of followers because these again, you have to, if you haven't dealt with white liberals, you don't and when I say white liberals, I don't mean the Bernie types. They're very different. I'm talking about the centrist MSNBC types who hate Bernie. These people worship anti-Trump Republicans. It's crazy. You have to hear it to believe it. And so they all love Joe Walsh. And so he has this show, White Flag, which is all about talking to people. He said, this country, we need to prevent, civil war and, defend our democracy by talking to people with different views. And that's what White Flag is supposed to be. It's supposed to be about Joe, who's got his one set of views, talking to people with different views than him. And one of his, now am I recommending you listen to it? No, I'm going to recommend that you do not listen to it, because unless you're as interested in politics as I am, and particularly unless you're as interested in the mindset of center-left people, you will get nothing out of it. We're do you want to hear two white liberals two different, Joe Walsh plus one different white liberal every week, just get on and spurg about Trump, and then spurg about mud democracy and mud civility for like an hour. Like, to me, that's paradise. For most people, not very interesting. So, but he has like the two shows, as far as I know, two shows a week. For instance, this week's show, I think it's been released already. It has been released, but I haven't listened to it, and I'm not going to. Was with Alyssa Milano. So it's like an hour-long thing. And then he has like a shorter show in the middle of the week. Usually, I don't know if it's usual or it just was recently or what, because that's the one I'm responding to here, where he talks about where he just talks about, like, gives his own thoughts. He said, like, because White Flag is more about him getting other people's thoughts. This is him giving his thoughts about shit, like his, what he thinks about shit. And then in this last one that he had, or at least the last one I listened to, he had said, "Here's my email address for those of you who have constructive feedback. Send it to me. I want to hear from you." He actually said, "I want to hear from you." So I sent him a long letter. I think it's really well thought out, and no response. So this is supposedly all about mud dialogue and stuff. And I'm not, look, I mean, I hope I'm not sounding like I'm upset that he didn't respond. I have to admit, I did think he would at least. I wasn't expecting him to like invite me on the show or anything, because first of all, he'd lose a lot of, having me on the show would cause him to lose like a lot of his followers, because liberals don't like giving platforms to people like me. Now, obviously no liberals know who I am. I get that. But like, when I came on and expressed my point of view, they would be horrified, and they would be like, "Joe, how could you give this guy a platform?" Something like that. So I didn't expect him to have, and also, why, even if I was like the most interesting person ever, why would you have some complete marginally employed nobody, on the show? It doesn't make any sense. So I wasn't expecting an invitation to the show, but I thought there would at least be a reply, because he said, he's made such a big thing about how he's all into dialogue. We need to have dialogue in this country, and he said he specifically that he wanted feedback, and so I sent it to him, and I really thought he would respond to it. So I don't know if maybe he just saw, like, I started off the thing by saying that I was a Trump supporter. Maybe he just deleted it and didn't read. And again, and maybe I'm protesting too much, but seriously, I really am not upset. It's fine that he didn't respond. I actually, honestly, him not responding, I think, kind of further proves the point I was trying to make. But I did want to share what I wrote to him with you guys, because I think I brought up a lot of really important points about what he was getting at: dialogue, partisanship, United States. So I'll just read my letter to you. What I wrote to him. I said, "Hello, Joe. I have followed your Twitter account for a while and have listened to a few episodes of White Flag." That's the name of his show. "I myself am a hardcore Trumper. And while I find all the other never Trump conservatives, because if you're never Trump, you're not conservative in any meaningful sense of the way." And then in parentheses, I wrote, "except Sean Tren. Sean Tren, he's cool." Sean Tren is an anti-Trump conservative, but he's not really what you'd call never Trump. He voted against Trump in 2016, voted against him in 2020. But unlike the other never Trumpers, he's A, not deranged, and B, he's honest. He still provides good political analysis. I'm not crazy about him because I don't like his politics, but I don't really have a problem with him. So anyway, I do find all the other Trump conservatives to be loathsome. I do enjoy reading and listening to some of your stuff. It's true. Now, I agree with very little of what Joe Walsh says, but from like pure entertainment, and I don't think I've ever learned anything from it, but from a pure like entertainment stuff, from a pure entertainment angle, it's provided at least some. It's been at least somewhat interesting enough for me to keep reading his Twitter feed and keep, occasionally listening to his show. In your last show, you asked your viewers to share constructive feedback with you. So here is mine. 1. Every episode begins with a clip of you saying, quote, "This is about defending democracy." Democracy is a system of government, not a value. Those of us on the right are under no obligation to accept being ruled by our enemies, regardless of whether it is technically democratic or not. I think that's self-explanatory, right? That's say. Furthermore, you know damn well that your almost exclusively left-wing audience defines democracy as quote, an electoral result that is acceptable to the sensibilities of gentry liberals, end quote. Hence, democratic states like Poland and Hungary are autocracies because the voters keep electing leaders that liberals don't approve of. Yeah, nothing to argue with there, right? Finally, even if Trump gets reelected in 2024 with 60% of the vote, there is no possibility of him turning America into a, quote, autocracy, unquote, because such a method of governance has already proven to be impossible in a developed economy. One of the points I made was how Russia and China both needed to halt or even reverse their own economic liberalization because it was threatening the control the level of control the regimes in those countries had. The Communist Party in China and Putin's clique in Russia are okay with a slower level of economic growth in exchange for keeping a greater degree of control. Economic liberalization inevitably leads to power decentralization. So for Trump to create an autocracy, something I don't even think he wants to do, because that would be way too much effort for Trump, and he wouldn't be able to focus enough to do it anyway. Nor would he be able to have the relationships with the right people to pull it off. To pull that off would require, especially in a super decentralized country like the United States, would require a level of increasing state regulation of industry and takeover of industry to a point that's not conceivable without a breakup of the Union and civil war. Nor is it conceivable that the Republican Party would go along with it. I mean, huge chunks of his own supporters wouldn't go along with it. So it's just completely insane. I made a video. You guys remember how, those of you who've been following, remember how radical I was when Biden came in office. Because when Biden got elected, I really thought, me personally, ballface 80-20, I'm going to jail. Because Biden's going to, come down on everybody who, supported Trump or has opposed Joe Biden, and I've got videos on the internet. And then I kind of realized, obviously I'm not in jail now. I realized even before that, you know what? That's probably not going to happen because, that level of power that I know that liberals are going for is not really possible in a country that's as decentralized as ours and a country that's as economically complex. It's just not doable. So, and as for so you say, well, what about making the country less, less capitalist then? Make the country more state controlled, and then you can go after people like me or Trump supporters. It's well, that wouldn't happen either because the donors of the Democratic Party don't want that because there's some socialist voters for the Democratic Party, but the people who are in control are all center left liberals who are very right wing economically. So the control that the liberals have had, they've had to settle for cancel culture type stuff, and deplatforming. But they really haven't been able to shut down free speech yet. Now, they're going to keep trying. They may very well find more success, but as of now, they haven't been able to. They haven't even been able to enforce their vaccine mandates, which is something that I thought that they would do better than they had. And also, and I also mentioned that, again, our country is so big and so federalized that an authoritarian it's not conceivable. It's too big to take over in that sense. Now, I know that they did it in Russia, but that was in the aftermath of a civil war. you know. So I'm saying, so I mean, obviously, yeah, you can do anything. You can do anything you want if you wanted to, if you wanted to have a civil war. But without a civil war, no, country, no, not feasible. So anyway, I'm sorry, not point number 3, point number 2. You also feature a clip, this is at the beginning of the show, of you saying, quote, there needs to be some give and take, end quote. First of all, there already is a tremendous amount of give and take in American politics. It's just that it all happens inside the parties, not between them. You know, and I think that's a very good point. Good point by me. Secondly, the only, quote, give and take there ever is between you and the liberal guest you have on your show is where you give and they take. They never give you an inch, not even to humor you. This is true. It's almost like it's a mixture of funny and sad to listen to, because, like I said, his politics haven't changed. Still pro-gun and pro-life, but he's all about, he's like, we got to find common ground with these, you know, he's all about trying to find common ground with liberals. And even these, like, liberals on the show who see him as an ally in fighting Trumpism, they are not willing to give him any ground whatsoever. Like, he spent an hour talking to this guy about gun control, some liberal guy, I don't know who he was. And he could not get the guy to bend on anything. But then he was at the end, he's like, oh, well, we did agree on one thing. We agreed that there should be expanded background checks. It's like, yeah, okay, but that whatever, man. I mean, okay, maybe we should have expanded background checks. I don't know, but that's not like you didn't. All you did was you happened to agree on like one relatively minor issue that involved you giving something. Even if it was something you supported, you were willing to say, like, oh yeah, well, we should have more background checks. That's a concession to him, because that's increasing the level of control from what the status quo is. You got nothing from him. Nothing. This is a guy who sees you as, you know, an invaluable ally in the fight against fascism. He still isn't even willing to pretend to give you something, because that's just how liberals think. You know, they don't. I mean, compromise isn't. It's just not. It's not how their minds work. You know, and I don't even mean that as a criticism. I really don't. It's just, you know, it is what it is. So point number 3, your stated reason for doing White Flag is that you believe that the country is dangerously divided and we need to talk to the other side. However, as you yourself have repeatedly pointed out, the only political divide of any significance in 2022 America is between pro-Trump and anti-Trump. You don't talk to the other side. You talk to your own side. That's who he's having on his show, is his own side. People who are also anti-Trump. You had Santorum on. Santorum is an old school Republican. He used to be a senator, who's not really pro-Trump, but he's like, yeah, well, I'll still vote for him because you know, the Democrats are worse. But he doesn't like Trump, and he would rather Trump go away. Yeah, you had Santorum on, but he is part of the old guard who tolerate Trump but would also like for him to go away as soon as possible. I don't have a problem with Santorum, but he isn't representative of the base of the Republican Party, and you know it. And that's true. So you got to give him partial credit for bringing Santorum on. I don't know if maybe they knew each other when they were both in Congress. You know, but I don't know if he's had other, you know, like real Republicans. I'm sure I know he's had other never Trump Republicans, but Republicans who however reluctantly supported Trump. I don't know if he's had any other than Santorum, but I will say that he got, you know, so give him partial credit there. However, he got much more upset at Santorum than I've ever heard him get at his liberal guest. And then his follow-up to the Santorum thing, like, he totally spazzed out, because he's actually normally fairly calm, which you wouldn't expect from his Twitter feed. But like, after he did the Santorum interview, the hour-long interview, he comes in and he's talking about, like, you know, he's just like screaming like at his listeners, saying like, I was just so furious that Santorum is willing to back this criminal to stop just to stop the Democrats with this culture war bullshit when we need to be defending democracy. And it's like, whatever, man. But the thing is, it's like, all right, fine, you were polite, civil to Santorum when he was on, but and then the fact is you talked to him and you obviously came out angrier than when you went in it, and you weren't willing, you give and take, you weren't willing to do any give and take with him other than the part where he said he's not crazy about Trump either. So you're not really, you're not living up to your own standards here. Really, the show is basically just you talking to liberals who you agree with on the most important issue, and then you got one guy who has lukewarm support of Trump, and you got extremely pissed at him. And by the way, he mentioned, like, and I think this was part of it why he went so nuts in his response, that his listeners are 100% liberals, so his listeners were all really pissed because, like, even like, remember how I was talking about, like somebody like me would horrify him, even somebody like Rick Santorum, like a totally innocuous middle of the road conservative, is just too fascist for modern Democrats. So point number 4. Continuing on the above point, you say that you have no interest in speaking with people who agree with you. He does say that you want to talk to people who disagree. Yet your guests are almost exclusively center-left resistance types who agree with you completely that Trump is an existential threat to ... I don't even know what, because I don't. Like, he's a threat to democracy. What? I mean, look. I mean, if he was, I would be all for that. I just don't know what the hell you're talking about. Like, do these people? And I can't tell. I know that some of the rank and file do, but the people who are like leaders in media, like the Rachel Maddow types and stuff, do they seriously believe this shit? That Trump is going to like establish a right-wing dictatorship? I really can't tell. Sometimes I think they know they're lying. Sometimes I think that they've lied so much that they've convinced themselves of it. I can't really tell. Whatever it is you guys are worried about. Point number 5. You said that you disagreed with Joan Walsh, but that you had a good time in your conversation with her. Joan Walsh, no relation. She's a liberal writer, used to write for Daily Kos, used to be on MSNBC. I don't know what she does now. Maybe she still writes for Daily Kos. No relation to Joe Walsh. Joe Walsh and Joan Walsh, I think they're from the same part of the country. I'm assuming they're both Irish, although she might actually, that Walsh might be her married name. I don't know. But they... I think it's her maiden name. I don't know. But they have no relation. In America. There's a lot of people named Walsh. There's a lot of Irish people in America. There's actually, I think, 10 times more Irish Americans than there are Irish in Ireland. So anyway, you said you disagreed with Joan Walsh, but that you had a good time in your convo with her. Yeah, because you both agree that fighting Trump is the most important thing. So you are both, for now, willing to gloss over your areas of disagreement. And despite that, it was clear in your guys' conversation that she still was unwilling to give you anything at all on policy, whereas you showed some flexibility with her. You spent years arguing with liberals for a living. You know how they think, and that compromise is something they simply do not do. Who are you trying to kid here? Yourself? And this is what I was, saying about him. Like, the people who are never Trump for the beginning are one thing, but the people who are really part of the movement, who really lived and breathed this stuff, who were like in the trenches fighting the left, they understand how liberals think. So, like, what is this shit now that he's saying? And I don't know if there's other people like him out there. You understand the left, so why would you try to go be... Like, if you're saying Trump is such an existential threat that I have to join the left to get rid of Trump, that I can understand. But if you're saying that, like, no, we need to, like, find common ground with the left, it's like, dude, you know how the left operates. You fought with them for years. You know that common ground isn't something they do. It's not in their DNA. And by the way, this isn't just an American thing. Liberals are left-wing people. This is a left thing, not a liberal thing. There's centrist liberals and there's the left. And generally speaking, I don't like the left. I don't agree with them really on anything except for being like anti-police and anti-capitalist. But and I'm not even anti-capitalist in the same way that the left is. I just hate, Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos. But this is something with left in general, not just white centrist liberals. The left everywhere in the world, they have a very totalitarian mindset. The left everywhere in the world does not compromise. There is no left that's willing to compromise. It's all like my way or the highway. That's with every, and I admire that. I admire that. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm just explaining that's how people on the left think. Similarly, you mentioned that Jane Lynch, Jane Lynch is that really tall lesbian from the 40-Year-Old Virgin. She was in movies for a while and then kind of disappeared. The short blonde haired woman. Similarly, you mentioned that Jane Lynch said that, quote, speaking across the divide could help heal the country. First of all, again, there is no divide between you and Lynch on Trump, the only issue that really matters. Secondly, you were one of us for decades, so you know that Red America has zero interest in, quote, healing or unity with the left. Yeah, this is something that the left is really big on. I'm sorry, not the left, because the Bernie types tend to be more honest about this. That they're just gonna, comment, like they're just gonna steamroll us. They don't want to compromise or whatever. But the center left, the MSNBC types, are really into this like compromise and bipartisanship, and we need to unite and heal and stuff. But they really think of it as like they can force us to unite with them. They mean like when they say unity, they mean they want us to submit. And that would be fine if that's just what they were advocating. But what they're essentially, what they seem to think is that you can have unity by force. And I don't know if that's because they're just fucking nuts, or if it's because they think that's what happened in the aftermath of the Civil War, when it's not. And that's just not how it played out. The end of the Civil War was, now the North won the war, but the political solution at the end of the Civil War was a compromise, where the North had to give up a lot, or it was going to lose the South. So and which is something that the left would never do. They wouldn't have done it back then either. So it's but no, they really think that they can force unity, which makes no sense. So like they talk about unity and stuff, but they never think like, well, do you like, what makes you think we want unity with you? And they don't think about it, because to us, like, we have no, like, it's like to us, it's like we're not even people to them. It's just like, well, they have no choice. We want unity, so they have to have unity with us. In fact, the reason we love Trump so much is because he has accelerated the end of the false unity of our politics. It's true. That's the most important thing Trump did. 7, you claim that we all want the same things, we just disagree on how to get there. Actually, no. Red America wants to be ruled by our people, and Left America wants to be ruled by their people. That is a completely irreconcilable difference, and it would still be the case even if Trump had never entered politics. American politics is largely a tribal battle for dominance over the hated other political tribe. This is a fight for self-determination. I know you get this, although it's possible many or most of your current fans don't. So why don't you just admit that the gap is unbridgeable and move on to other issues? Finally, you get on the whole civility train. How civil have you been towards Trump, his family, and his supporters over the past several years? How civil has your new tribe been? What about the Joan Walshes of the world? Have they been models of civility in the Trump era? I mean, that's the thing. I mean, look at how the left has behaved over the, last 7 years or whatever. Like, have they been, civil? No, they've been violent, they've been vile, they've been horrible. They haven't been civil at all. And, again, I don't think we've been civil to Biden. I don't think we've been as extreme as the left is, and I don't think we should be, for our own sake, not for theirs. But the thing is, I get it if you're going to say, well, Trump and his supporters don't deserve civility. I get it. I'd feel the same way about the left. It's just that, like I said, I think for our own sake, we shouldn't use the tactics that they do. But then you can't whine about civility after that. Obviously civility is, you mean the other side should be civil to you? Because that's what they're basically saying. It's like, oh, no, when we say civility, we mean you should be civil to us. We don't have to be civil to you, though. But anyway, but that's neither here nor there. What I was more interested in was you bragging about how you were able to keep your disagreement with Milano. I'm talking about Alyssa Milano, because he had talked about this in the last episode. He was bragging about how they really disagreed on abortion, but they were willing to keep it civil. Your disagreement with Milano over abortion civil. A few things here, and for the record, I am strongly pro-choice myself. A, you ostensibly believe that abortion is murder. So would you also be bragging about keeping civility in a debate over pedophilia? If not, why not? Are you saying that murdering infants does not cross the line of morally acceptable disagreement, whereas something like pedophilia, animal cruelty, or genocide does? And I think that I hope that's self-explanatory. So you can't say that abortion is murder. So like abortion is murder, right? It's like, okay, you think abortion, killing an unborn child is as bad, presumably, as killing a born child. So you're willing to sit down and shake their hand of somebody who supports killing an unborn child? Are you willing to sit down and shake the hand of somebody who says, you know, I think abortion should be legal even after the child's born, up until the child is 5 years old? Would you sit down and shake their hand too? If no, why not? I mean, you already said the unborn baby was a child, right? So, which is it? You know, which is it? I mean, I want to know, because I've never heard a straight answer to this. And then B, you give, they take. The convo remains civil only because abortion is still legal. If abortion were ever outlawed, Alyssa and a large chunk of your new friends would describe you as Hitler. I guarantee you that Joan, for instance, would break off all contact with you if abortion were ever outlawed, and I suspect you yourself realize as much. Again, we all know this. We all know this. Any of us who've dealt with the left have known this. Like, yeah, they're willing to be civil to an anti-Trump guy who's pro-life for now, while Trump is still a threat. What happens when Trump is gone and forgotten, and then a law is passed? This isn't going to happen, but and then Trump's gone, but then a law is passed saying abortion is illegal, like in the whole United States. That's not going to happen either. But are those people still going to be tolerant of Joe Walsh, who supports this law? No, they're going to say he's a Nazi, he's Hitler, he's the enemy, and they're going to do all the same stuff they're currently saying about Trump supporters, they're going to say about him. Everybody knows this. This is like so obvious stuff. So like, why are you making this like all about Trump or whatever? Point 9. One other thing. Stop scaring your naive MSNBC watching followers that their Trumpist neighbors are just waiting for the signal to grab their guns and start murdering liberals. I don't care how many deranged people you talk to on Facebook. Oh yeah, that's another thing with Joe Walsh. He's got this like fetish with going on Facebook and like trying to have like dialogue with like really crazy right-wing people on Facebook. I don't know if it's like he's taunting them or what, but they always, like they just send him tons of hate messages and stuff. It's like, but if you're like the people who are deranged enough to be, sending internet messages to some nobody, they're not really representative. Also, stuff that people say online doesn't mean anything. Like I've said tons of crazy shit online that, I don't believe at all. It's just like, it's kind of like how like some people for some reason, like myself included, really lose their cool when driving. I don't know what it is, but that's like the one thing that I still have anger problems when it comes to like road rage. I have no idea what it is about driving that sets me off, but that's the one thing. And there's internet rage, when people I've gotten a lot better on. But the stuff people post on Facebook doesn't mean anything. So anyway, he talks to these nutbags on Facebook, and he uses that as an evidence that Trump supporters are getting ready to kill liberals. But anyway, I'll start from the beginning. Stop scaring your naive MSNBC watching followers that their Trump's neighbors are waiting for the signal to grab their guns and start murdering liberals. I don't care how many deranged people you talk to on Facebook. You know that those people are all talk and just blowing off steam. Yes. The actual mood amongst Trump supporters is pretty calm now. I stand by that too. I don't hear anyone on our side talking about civil war these days. I don't even hear much grumbling about Biden. It's true. I don't really hear about it. It's nothing. Whereas liberals wouldn't shut up the entire time Trump was in office. It was a nonstop me hearing like Trump. They would find a way to bring Trump into every conversation. I heard a lot of anti-Biden stuff. Not really a lot, but some anti-Biden stuff at the beginning when Biden first got in. But I don't hear anybody talk about it anymore. And I know a lot of Trump people, and nobody talks about it. It's kind of like, just kind of like, we don't like Biden, but we don't really have anything to say about him. The mood is way calmer than it was. I don't even hear much grumbling about Biden. In contrast, there was definitely a strong, quote, Civil War now vibe during the lockdowns and the election aftermath. Yes, Yes, I would say that the mood in the country, the closest, I know I've talked about this before, the mood in the country, the closest it ever was to civil war in my lifetime was, the closest was the lockdowns. I mean, I think we were very close to seeing police officers starting to get killed if the lockdowns had continued. And then as for the election aftermath, I mean, that was when I was really pushing civil war, and I did have people like, people were talking about it. I was just talking to like random people who I could tell were Trump supporters and be like, hey, you ready for civil war? And be like, oh yeah, let's do it. Obviously it didn't come to that. We weren't nearly as far down the road as I thought we were. But that was the time that I would say there really was a lot of civil war sentiment. Is there anything, is it like that now? No, way calmer now, way calmer. The situation can always change, but right now things are fine. You are really scaring a lot of your Twitter followers unnecessarily. I know I've talked with some of them. I have, and he's really freaked a lot of them out, and it's fucked up. And it's totally disgusting. You should be ashamed of yourself. I also like your recent praise for Ian Omar, simping for crypto Nazis to own the MAGAs. You've sure come a long way, man. Now, look, I don't care about Ian Omar, but this gets back to the other thing I was saying. This is a guy who, even still now, he makes a big deal about fighting anti-Semitism. But it's like, fighting anti-Semitism, I mean, Ian Omar is an outright Nazi. So you're like, you're going to you're going to go and, simp for her. Because he made this thing, it's like, I can't wait to tell my granddaughter about the time you and I, proud, and a staunch conservative like me, and he's not a staunch conservative. You can't be anti-Trump and be conservative. That doesn't make any sense. And a proud, liberal, progressive woman like you locked arms to defend democracy. It's like, locked arms? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? She doesn't. I don't think she even knows who you are just because she responded to some tweet. But you didn't, like, I mean, like, you called her a proud progressive woman. It's like, she's not just a progressive, man, all right? I mean, she's, like, a pretty clear anti-Semite. And it's like, whatever, man. Like, I'm willing to, like, I'd be willing to work with anti-Semites to fight Joe Biden. So, I don't have a problem with him being willing to work with anti-Semites to fight Trump. But you don't lie about what they are. And you kind of lose the right to say, like, the difference is I don't make a big deal about fighting anti-Semitism as a core value, so I'm not saying, like, so I wouldn't be a hypocrite to go and, like, say, like, yeah, I know that there's, anti-Semitic people presumably who support Trump or whatever, and I don't care because it's worth it to fight Biden. And because, like, but I've never made a big thing about fighting anti-Semitism, but this is a guy who still does make a big deal about fighting anti-Semitism, and then yet he's publicly allying with an avowed anti-Semite, David Duke's favorite congresswoman. Then as I followed up, I tried to end it on a positive note. As for you losing most of your family and friends, yeah, that's rough. Literally, my entire family besides myself are Biden people, and they've never even threatened to disown me, even when I myself came pretty close to doing the same to them. I even have some anti-Trump friends and clients. True, I do. In fact, I think that anti-Trump, like in insurance at least, and really in any sales business, I've found the anti-Trump people easier to deal with. Some of them tend to be like a little unhinged, but like a lot of them really are really nice. My rule is to just not mix the political and the personal, especially when it's all really about tribal allegiance, not actual policy differences. See, that is, I really do want to end on that note, because that's something that, if you're still watching, that I think is really important. Because I've been asked about this and I've thought about it myself. People are like, well, how can you say that liberals are evil and then still be, but like, so it's okay for you to go, hate on liberals, but like, would you say the same, if it was your liberal family under attack? And I said, well, no, because I've got a connection to my family. I don't have a connection to some random liberal out there. But that was never totally satisfying for me. And, because, and I've talked about this, I know, like I was saying, like, it's just, like whatever I think of their politics, like, it would just be incorrect for me to describe the liberals in my family as bad people. They're just not. There's just no way I could say that. It's just false. Like, even if I fucking hated them, I couldn't describe them as bad people. So there's always been kind of a contradiction. On one hand, I'm saying liberals are evil. On the other hand, you know, I've got liberals in my family who I know not only aren't evil, but are actually really good. And what I've come to realize is that since we're essentially, at the end of the day, we're not really talking about a policy dispute. I mean, policy gets thrown in, it matters, particularly immigration. But ultimately, it's not about policy. It's about tribal identity. So my family members who support liberals, like, you know, I see now that there's nothing wrong with that, because of course they support Democrats, because that's their tribal alignment. How could they do anything else? That's no more evil than some Somali in one tribe supporting his tribe over his neighbor's tribe. Doesn't mean that, like, doesn't make him evil or anything. Now, it might make them enemies, but it doesn't make one side evil. Although, you know, inevitably in conflict, the other side gets demonized. And then, like, I mean, me, who's like relatively policy focused compared to some people, you know, I would admit that, you know, loyalty to the GOP and especially loyalty to Trump is a tribal thing, because very likely I could get more policy stuff I want from a DeSantis than I could from Trump. Yet I'm loyal to Trump for some of its tactical reasons. But if I'm being honest with myself, it's mostly a tribal thing. You know, that this guy represents us, you know, us against them. So if that's what it's about, tribal identity, then there's no need to say that the other side is bad people for thinking the way they do or supporting the stuff they do. There's, like, honestly, a liberal would be a bad person if they didn't support their own side. You know, I mean, because you gotta stand for, if you're not for you, nobody else is going to be. And same thing with us. Having said that, I still think liberals are evil. So I guess in some ways I didn't learn anything at all. But that's all for now, and I'll see you in the next.